The study was designed, it's actually part of this larger study we have called the CHARGE study, Childhood Autism Risks from Genes and the Environment. And of course we've published a number of different findings over the last few years. And we wanted to pick up on this theme about pesticides. And of course there's different ways you can be exposed to pesticides. You can be exposed to pesticides because there's residues in your foods. You can be exposed to pesticides because you spray, you've got problems, pests at home, insects, what have you. You're spraying for ants, or you're putting out little baits, or you're bringing in these foggers, or some professional services who often use the foggers. And then that sprays into the air. It may settle on surfaces. It may settle into the house dust and get resuspended every time you kind of walk around on your carpets or what have you. And then there's the applications that may happen for commercial or agricultural purposes, where there can be drift, into residential areas, or you may live actually very close to fields where there might be regular spraying and other kinds of applications. So the latest study here was in fact looking at families who have a child with autism, families who have a child with typical development, and then families who have a child with a developmental delay other than autism, usually intellectual disability of some type. We mapped their homes from when they lived, from where they lived at the time of the pregnancy and around the time of birth. And then we were able to link those addresses to a database on all of the most of the commercial applications of pesticides in California. And we have a system where pesticide applicators are required to report where they're applying, what they're applying, the dates that they made the application, and how much they actually applied. So it's a lot of information, and we do that linkage because we have the locations, and we're able to therefore say, people who are living roughly near these applications at the time when, let's say, it was the first trimester of the pregnancy or what have you. So what we saw was that there were associations with several classes of pesticides. It included organophosphate pesticides. So organophosphates are fairly short-lived. They don't stick around too long, at least that's what, for the most part, compared to some much longer-lived ones that we used to use, much more commonly in the 1950s, 60s, and so forth. So we have these more short-lived organophosphates, and then we have another group called the carbamates, and then the third group were the pyrethroids, which are now more commonly used. And all three of them had some association with a higher risk for either autism or for developmental delay, other types of developmental delay. And this is actually the third study to show some link with the organophosphates and autism risk. But, I think it's an area that people do need to think about, both at the individual level. If they can make some choices, it may be worth it to them. I have certain things I make choices about. I don't use chemical pesticides that are toxic. I rely on the more green approach. I'm willing to. I know it takes sometimes a little bit longer to get rid of the. If you do that, it might take 2 or 3 days. You can't just eliminate them the same day. Sometimes when you put out like the little baits or what have you, and I'm willing to live with those extra couple of days where there might be creepy crawly things, and